This video, we're going to talk about alla prima painting, which is about basically just painting it on the first go, shape by shape, just getting it right as you go. And it's a great way to get over just fussing and overworking your paintings. So here's the image we're going to be looking at. It's in the south of France. Here's how I cropped it, and you can see it makes it tighter and more focused. And then here's the finished painting. I want to show you the compositional structure that I'm thinking of before I begin to paint, and then just a moment on my color mixing so it kind of makes more sense when you're watching me do the demonstration, and then I'll do the demonstration alla prima, and you'll see I'll just be finishing it as I go, shape by shape by shape. And at the end I've got 3 tips for you on how to do alla prima painting yourself. So let's get started. This is Ian Roberts and Mastering Composition. So I've got it gridded to help you see how I'm organizing the structure of it. So the horizon line is here, which is the big horizontal. And then there's this big curve leading back to here. It's also echoed here and here. And it'll take us back to the center of interest right there. It's not a building or a barn or anything. It's just that field right there, 2 lines of paint. So the whole structure is going to orchestrate to that. And there's my palette for the painting. So in the sunlit areas, there'd be chrome oxide green with some use of one of these yellows or a couple of these yellows and perhaps some white. And there might be a touch of ultramarine or orange just to sort of modify the color. And then in the shadows, again, chrome oxide green, ultramarine blue, dioxazine purple, or if it's really dark, phthalo green and alizarin, and they might be modified with some ochre or some blue or some green or something just to sort of pull that around. But you can get an almost infinite variety of color just using that palette. So there's the canvas, 20 by 24 inches. I'm going to be painting it in oils, and I have a good rich tone there, which will, if it pops through in the painting, you won't really notice it because it'll just fall into the illusion. This is one color that actually didn't fall into the way I was describing them before, and it's the distant trees, because they're cool because of atmospheric perspective, and they don't have a warm and a cool side. They've just they're starting to simplify into just a very simple shape back there. There's a little hit of even lighter blue, which is sort of indicating a group of trees even behind this group of trees. But there you can just see I've got 2 shapes, and I'm painting in the sky holes, or actually, around the trunks. There I'm just flicking the brush lightly to sort of soften those edges. Couple of places where I'm just putting little touches of shape into, and then you see I've just created the shape and I'm leaving it. Now this is the center of interest color. This is that field in the background, and I've just got, that's it. And then now I'm going to be putting in a green in front of that. You see sort of a darker green because it's in front of that yellow field. And that's kind of boxing in and sandwiching the contrast for the center of interest. So I've pretty much keyed the painting. Keyed meaning, you can key it light, you can key it dark, you can key it sort of a more tonal painting or high intensity painting. I've sort of keyed the colors now right in that center of interest, and everything will be building off that. So there you see I've got the shadow side of those trees. They've come forward enough that there's a lit side and a dark side. But they're just shapes, and I've just figured that shape out in relationship to the color underneath it, to the left of it, and so on. So I'm building up these colors in relationship, one to the next to the next. So each one comes off the last one. So this is the lit side of those same trees. It's not a big contrast. And notice how deliberate the brush marks are. I'm really trying to find that shape. And then you'll notice that I just sort of get edges. I'm paying attention to the edges against the color behind it. I want you to notice something of what I'm doing here. If I get this color in, then when I come to this shape, I'm looking at this in relationship to this color. And then when I come to this shape, I'm looking at it in relationship to this color and this color. And when I come over here, I'm looking at this shape in relationship to this shape. And if I'm getting them accurate, each one to the next, I'm just building them one off of the next all the way forward. Now this is the tree just to the right of what I was painting before. And you can see as I go, the number of subtle variations just using those few colors. You can see just sort of organizing the edge there against the sky. And I'm painting the two trees because they're quite close together. And so I'm painting them both. And then there's one that's coming a little forward, a little bit more yellow in it just to differentiate it. And then now I'm going to put the shadow side of those two trees in. So you can sort of see the way I'm neutralizing the color there. And then I'm just, there's the lit side. Now I'm getting in the dark side and I'm paying attention to the edges and the way they interact. I'll probably come back and actually paint something on top of that because the lit side has to be on top of the shadow, right? The shadow's underneath. But you can see there, I'm just making sure that they feel like they're in front of it. But you can see that I finished it. I'm not going to go back and work on those two trees again. So here I'm putting in a real dark. Just on that next bush, it got a little bit more intense a green and then a real dark in there. Then I wanted to put those trees, sort of background trees in there as well. But what happened is it made me realize that the color I had wasn't quite enough to differentiate them. So I just put a little bit more yellow in it just to pop that edge away from that pale blue. So now I've sort of got it, you'll see I got a couple other pieces in there in behind these bushes I'm doing now. I wanted just to show you these three bushes because I paint the lit side in, being attentive to the edge against the darks there. And then you'll see that I put the shadow side in. And I just want you to see the way, you can see that those marks, those little flicks like that, they're not very big, but they're just enough to say, oh, I see this is in front of that. It just gives that sense of now we're closer to them, so we're seeing a few more of this shape is in front of that, and it has this much detail because of where it sits. But look at the way the shadows shapes are going in here, how I'm integrating the lit side and the dark side as I go. And then I never go back to touch it. I'm just paying attention as much as I can to the shape and making sure I'm getting that sense of form of the light coming round into the shadow, getting the form. And you can see that my brush, puts down paint when I need to. And then as it comes to the edges, it's just sort of feathering it to sort of get that sense of the shape of lit and dark and both of them together. And then I fill in a few holes here, but then I think that's it. I don't think I go back. Then I clean the whole palette off because what I'm sort of doing now is coming forward, we could almost say into the foreground. You'll see what I mean when you see where this color goes. But it's sort of like now I've done the midground. You see the different colors that I'm pulling to get this. But this now is coming a step forward. Sort of now we're looking at the foreground. And look at how carefully I'm sort of making the marks against the darks to say, oh, this is now closer. I'm seeing this thing with more information. It's not busy, but it's just a little bit more information. Now, the other thing about this is I mixed three colors. You see that last one I just showed you was just two, light and dark. This one now has three colors, a little closer. There's the lit side that's catching the light. Then this kind of mid-tone that's sort of the body of the whole thing. And then I put in a real dark underneath it because now we're getting closer, so the darks would be a little bit more apparent. And put the third value in there at the bottom. So we have three values there as it's coming forward. And you can see as you come forward, there's more information, there's a little bit more detail, a little bit more intense color. And each step just comes forward like that. And then I put in that color you can see, that sort of pale green, now with more yellow in it. Same value, same intensity. It's just a slightly different color. And there is really, using this palette, that there's just virtually an infinite number of colors that you can just modulate to sort of make sure that the temperature and the value and so on are adjusting so that we see where it sits in space. So now I've got this kind of dirt color. It's not that dramatically different, but interplaying the green and the dirt. I didn't spend much time, I spent a lot of time actually on this wheat field. There's really only two values, the one I'm putting in now to sort of block in the dark shapes. and then a lighter one, which is really just yellow, ochre, and white. But I was playing those two back and forth of sort of because there's a lot of really beautiful soft edges in there. So I kind of soften all the edges and then have to go back in and put a few darks in there and then soften those again. But that took some back and forth to get that beautiful sense of the field, but it was all painted wet into wet right there, and then when I was done, I was done. Now I'm just finishing the foreground. You can see that I take this color and I just flick it up into those lit side of the grasses and a couple of strokes like that, and it just sort of gives a sense of clumps of grass with shadow. And I don't want a lot of busyness in the foreground, so I'm just keeping the shapes pretty simple, playing the browns against the greens and keeping that all really simple. And then there is the finished painting. Notice the compositional structure that I mentioned at the beginning, what I was trying to do, and everything that you saw as I painted it in the demonstration, that's the way the painting was. I didn't go back and adjust it. So I want to give you 3 tips for alla prima painting. The first is structure. To think about the structure, the compositional structure of your painting before you begin. Because if you get halfway through your painting and realizing you've got serious problems here, then a lot of your efforts might be wasted as you have to go back in and maybe try to make corrections. So I'd start with something simple, say an image like this, which you can almost count the number of shapes, maybe 10 shapes. I would focus primarily on the background and the midground and not think about the foreground field so much. And you're welcome to use that image if you think you'd find it helpful. The second tip is to slow down. Just enjoy this process. Really enjoy this process of slowing down and looking for the color, testing it, adjusting it, testing it, and adjusting it. There's a lot to think about when you're doing this all at once. Hue, value, intensity, temperature, the edges, the shape itself, the brushwork. So just slow right down, just shape by shape. It may seem slow at first, but over time you'll gain practice at it. And the third thing is force yourself, once you find a shape and put it in, to leave it. Not to go back and keep fussing. If you get something that looks pretty good, leave it and then go on to the next shape, because you can gain a lot in leaving it of a kind of freshness and vitality to the painting that overrides perhaps some of the little problems you think that are going on there. So those are 3 tips. I hope you find them helpful. I hope you enjoy alla prima painting. I hope you had a wonderful summer and a creative and expressive fall to come. I wish you all the very best, and bye for now.